Hello, everyone. Thank you for tuning into today's podcast. I'm your host, Gabrielle Hiller. In my previous episode, I told you all about my family dynamic, how I was raised, the things that went up and down during my childhood, and kind of formed me into the woman that I am today. If you haven't listened to that episode, I would recommend going back and listening to it before you listen to this one. But if you don't feel like listening to it, that's okay. In today's episode, I'm going to be sharing with you more about who I was as a person and really the type of person that I was before I came to Christ. Every person who decides to follow Christ has a past, and I definitely have not made good decisions. Even after I got saved, I still made plenty of bad decisions. I was a very rebellious teenager. I was very conceited and we'll just say a lost child. I'm going to be spilling the tea on past relationships and unbagging some trauma that I went through as well. So I just got done recording this podcast, and as I'm recording it, I'm like, wow, I should probably put a trigger warning or some kind of disclaimer in the beginning of the podcast, because what I'm about to share with you guys is so we're talking about eating disorders, we're talking about sex, we're talking about alcohol, and there's just a lot of hard topics that I cover in this. It's not easy to talk about. You can kind of hear in the tone of my voice when things get hard for me to talk about them. But if I can help one person, or if one person can take something away from this episode, that's my goal. So yeah, this is your disclaimer. It's gonna get kind of ugly. Listen at your own discretion. Thank you so much for listening, and here is the episode.
You have a voice. You should use it. You serve a God who gave you a gift. You should share it. You have the ability to create. Go create something. Hi, I'm Gabrielle Beth, and you're listening to the Bespoken Faith podcast. My hope is to share truth, give advice, or even tell funny, not so funny stories. I may even share some poetry with y'all from time to time. So whatever we're talking about, I hope you feel welcome. And don't forget to love generously, be spoken, and have faith.
So in episode 1, I shared about how I was sexually assaulted as a teenager, and that was honestly when I lost sight of who I was. My innocence was taken from me, and after I got free from that, or after that season was put to an end, I started to pretty much do anything to get people to like me because I didn't like myself. So I would wear clothing that I thought really flattered me. I didn't have much of a shape. I was very, very skinny. I had a small chest, but I would overly do my hair and my makeup to try to make myself appear more beautiful and more confident. But I would overly do my hair and my makeup to try to make myself appear more attractive and desirable. And I would always latch onto boys. This was a habit that I started in high school. After that whole chapter had happened, I really wanted boys to like me for some reason, and just wanted the attention from people. I don't know what it was, but I remember flirting with guys and I would get rejected over and over. I didn't have many boyfriends, but I had a best friend, and she and I were terrible together. Sam, if you're watching this or listening to this, I love you to pieces, but we didn't always do the smartest thing. I don't know if y'all remember the app Meet Me, but Sam and I would talk to people on this app, and one night this guy she was talking to invited us out. So me, Sam, and my sister Ashley, we all went out with these two guys who we had never even met. We didn't even know them. So the guy that Sam was talking to, his friend that he brought, I ended up really liking him. The thing here though was that this guy was 20 and I was 16. He was still in a situationship with his ex, but I didn't care. I still really liked him. One night we ended up going to the guy's house who I had a crush on, and we all got a bit tipsy, and I tried to have sex with him, and he would not have sex with me while I was drunk like that. He was a good guy. I want to say we did have sex at one point, but if we did, it was only a one-time thing because, like, I don't even remember. But back to when I was 16, my friend Sam also introduced me to this guy named Kyle, who I mentioned in my last episode as well. But me and Kyle, we jumped right into a relationship. Like, it was so stupid. Like, I was just so desperate to have somebody like me and be in a relationship with someone that it really didn't matter that much to me, like what he looked like, what his ambitions were, like, and this guy like wasn't the brightest. I mean, who is that bright at like 16, 17 years old? You really don't know what you're doing with your life yet. Like, one thing I wish I could have told myself, and one thing that I try to tell other young people, is like, there is literally no rush. It's so much better to like focus on yourself and like your self-development, discovering who you really are when you're young, and then find your person. I really don't believe in like dating in high school. Even if you're going to college full time and everything, like, it's probably better if you just stay single unless you meet your person and you know that they are your person. But it's so much better to like not fool around or just like jump into relationships because you're desperate, honestly. Obviously at 16, like, you're a high school student, you're working part-time, you hardly have enough money to do anything. So we could hardly even go on any dates. He was also a partier, so we would get together with his friends and drink sometimes. We would have sex in his car because our parents' houses weren't an option. I actually smoked weed with him once and got extremely high. That was like the first and the last time that I smoke out of a bong. At the end of the day, I chose this guy who wasn't good for me over my friends. I made some terrible decisions when dating him, but I'm honestly just happy to be alive, honestly. And this one relationship actually showcases how lost I truly was and how little worth and self-care I had for myself at the time. There was actually a time in this relationship that I swore up and down that I was pregnant. My period was 3 weeks late. I took 2 pregnancy tests and they both came back negative. Then one morning, I finally got my period, but it was extremely heavy and clumpy. It was like nothing I've ever experienced before. My cramps hurt in a way that I've never experienced. I was on the phone with my mom, crying in pain on the toilet, and she asked me if there was a chance that I could have been pregnant. I said yes, but the test came back negative. And she said, well, maybe I'm having a miscarriage and I finally ate enough to like induce my period. During this time, I wasn't eating very much at all. Like I said, I had very low self-worth, self-esteem. I was very afraid of getting fat. I always had issues with my body and my body image. So a lot of times I would starve myself for an entire day. Sometimes I would only have a tablespoon of peanut butter. I would lock myself into my room for hours, and my mom became very worried about me because I was never usually like that. Like I was always a kind of quiet kid, but like I always enjoyed playing with my siblings, or the behavior that I was showing was so out of my character. I was battling a lot of demons during this time, not just anorexia, but depression and suicidal thoughts as well. There were 2 separate times that I met up with people I hardly knew. I would go out with these guys and drink with them, have sex with them, then go home. I hated the feeling that would come after I did that. Like, I would just sit and blankly stare. Because after you do something like that, you stop and you think, what did I just do? What am I becoming? Why did I do that? Like, I can't believe like that I even would do things like that. I would feel worse about myself after I would get home than I did before I would even go out. Because like I would meet up with these people because I would feel lonely, or I just wanted the attention or whatever, but it was just not worth it. So I quickly learned that one night stands were just not it for me, and it only took 2 occurrences for me to like never do that again. During this time I was severely depressed And my mom could tell that I was not doing okay. And she actually asked my ex-boyfriend Michael to reach out to me and try to talk me off the ledge. Michael was someone I had dated for a very brief moment when I was 15. It was a very long time ago, and him and I started talking, and we decided to go on a date. We fell in love very, very fast, but he truly loved me, and I actually got scared and decided to push him away because I was only 15, so I guess I didn't believe that true love could exist at such a young age. So yeah, I dumped him, and he tried to reconnect with me over the years, but I would just ghost him time and time again. So one night, shortly after my mom asked him to reach out to me, he called me. We had a very nice phone conversation. I remember, like, I was very shy, like, I didn't really know what to say, but he just talks to me like a best friend. He's always done that. And when I got off the phone with him that night, before hanging up, he said, "Please promise me you won't do anything to hurt yourself." And I promised. So the next morning I woke up, and for the first time in like a really long time, I woke up with like a new shift in my mind. Like, I woke up and I said, okay, like, suicide isn't an option. I'm gonna get through today and I'll see what happens. And then I got through that day, and then, I had to just get through the next day and the next day. And like, slowly but surely, like, I started to try to find things that I was more grateful for, and try to like actually find things to be like hopeful for, but I was so depressed, y'all. Like, I don't even know why. Like, I wish I could have went back in that time and like told myself, like, this chapter is so like tiny. Like, why are you being so hard on yourself? Like, I really wish I would have taken more time to just be a kid and like learn that it's really not that bad. Michael and I, we continued talking, and he asked me out on a date. I decided to go on a date with him, and we started what would be our 4-year relationship. Him and I were best friends. We were very different, and by that I mean we were both wired very differently, and we didn't share a lot of the same interests. He had a completely different upbringing than I did. His parents were very different than my parents, but we still loved each other, and we both got to see each other grow up. We both went to school. He became a police officer. I became a hairstylist. With him, I always felt safe, but despite our connection and how much we loved each other, I still wasn't happy. During this time, I was living away from my family. I didn't have any friends except for my few work friends. I had my grandparents and him and his family, so I became very homesick. I began to mention to him the idea of moving down south because I just didn't want to be away from my family anymore, but there was always an excuse or a reason as to why it was better to just stay up north. So at the end of my first episode, I mentioned how I started to go to church with my grandparents. Well, it was at this church that I found Christ. I remember the first time I went there, the pastor was preaching on forgiveness, and he led us into a prayer. And on that day, I was able to fully forgive every person from my past and forgive myself for every decision I had made. I like to think that it was on this day that I gave my life to Jesus. After that Sunday, I made the effort to go to church every Sunday, and I paid close attention to how the men treated their significant others and how they parented their kids. And one day I said, I really want a Christian husband. So one day I was with Michael and we had a talk, and I said to him, I don't want to get married unless you become a Christian because I don't want to be raising kids outside of Christ. At first he was upset, but then he said, well, okay, I'm going to give this Christianity a chance, but be patient with me. And he really tried, y'all. Like, this man and I had Bible studies. He really tried to understand the Bible. He came to church with me a few times. There was one night when he cooked dinner and he said grace before we ate. He would drop off coffee for me on his way to work, and on the coffee cup there would be a little Bible verse written on it. And I started to think that there might actually be a chance that we could work out. However, even though he was making this attempt to get to know Christ, I felt in my heart that it wasn't genuine and that he was only doing this so that I wouldn't leave him. So I did end up leaving him, and here we are, however many years later, and he's perfectly content with the life that he's created for himself. He's a cop, he works around the clock, he's wealthy, drinks as often as he pleases, and for the longest time, I would go back to him because even though he and I are incredibly different, I still loved him and knew he still loved me. We had this crazy connection that I can't even put into words, but it's just like whenever we would get on the phone, we would say like, how is this even real? Because like the feelings that we would have for each other, they're just so unreal. Sometimes love isn't enough to make a relationship work. There needs to be unity, and two people who are going to spend the rest of their lives together need to share the same beliefs and values. Everything else doesn't matter because everything outside of Jesus is either temporary or doesn't have much significance. I ended things with Michael right around our 4-year anniversary, and I moved to North Carolina because, as I mentioned, I was incredibly homesick and I wanted to be with my family. So after I ended that relationship and moved to NC, I thought I would be more committed to Christ than I was, because I left with this like new spark, like new freshness. Like, here I am, nobody can tell me how to live anymore, nobody can make decisions for me. But I honestly moved down here and I was like kind of clueless. Like, I feel like my life was so together when I was like living up north and I was with Mike, but in a way I almost think like moving and making this drastic life change was kind of a mistake. But they say everything happens for a reason too, so I don't know, I'm kind of glad I learned things the hard way, but I kind of also wish that I didn't make things so incredibly hard on myself. I had to be so humbled because even though I identified as a Christian, my heart was so far from God, and my actions truly showed it. And as someone who was pursuing hair and makeup, I knew that starting out, I wouldn't be making great money. So I decided to get certified in bartending because I knew bartenders made good money. But that was probably the first mistake. In that class, I met this boy named Clay. I decided to go to Clay's apartment one night with him and we just watched a movie. But a few days after that, he said he would like to get to know me more and asked if we could go on a date. At this time, I was still very much living in my old ways. Like, even though I believed in God and called myself a Christian, I still enjoyed the pleasures of life, like a guy finding me attractive and buying me drinks and dinner. At one point, I went back to his apartment and we watched a movie, and I did have sex with him. I didn't want to, like, I felt so icky in the moment, but I had such low respect for myself. I was also very prideful. Yeah, I was very vain and prideful. Like, I thought I was just hot stuff and I thought people only wanted me for my looks. I never thought I had a pretty face, mostly because my teeth were pretty jacked up. Like, I didn't get braces until I was in my 20s, and I had very, very bad acne, so I never really thought I was pretty. So ever since I was a teenager, I put my worth in the attractiveness of my body. As I was typing out this podcast, I actually found it to be healing because I never like to talk about this stuff or like fully admit what I've done in my past, but I want to be transparent here in hopes that if you are a woman who either recently came to Christ or is having a hard time knowing what it's like to fully submit to God or have a relationship with Him, I hope you can find encouragement and hope in the things I'm sharing with you today. So right around this time that I was seeing Clay, I started to also attend church, and I decided I was going to get baptized. I haven't ever been baptized before, and I told myself, okay, Gabs, like, After you go under that water, like, you're gonna come up a new person. You can't keep continuing in this sin anymore. Yeah, I ended things with Clay, like, right then and there, and I never spoke to him again after that. About a month after I got baptized, I started working at a hair salon called Harmony. It was at the salon that I met a gal named Liliana. On our first day of working together, she asked me if I had any pain in my body, and I did. I had a herniated disc in my back from a few years ago that caused me a bit of pain. Like, it was very difficult for me to work on my feet all day long without getting numbness in my feet. Thankfully nowadays, like, my back doesn't really get flared up unless I do something stupid in the gym. But praise God, like, I haven't really had much pain at all. But yeah, at the time it was very difficult for me to work 8-hour shifts on my feet because my leg and my left foot would become numb and it just felt like there was a stabbing pain in my back. So she asked if she could pray over my back. And that was the very first time that someone actually prayed and believed that Jesus can heal today. As a baby Christian, I had never heard of or seen someone lay hands on someone and pray for them with such faith and believing that Jesus was going to heal them right then and there. So that experience was very cool to me and, like, eye-opening, because until that point I had no idea that, like, people were actually, like, being prayed for and getting healed, like, miraculously in the moment. As we continued to work together, we shared our testimonies with each other and we ended up becoming friends. Liliana actually started to mentor me and teach me more about Jesus, and she did a little bit of evangelizing too. Like, she would go boldly up to people and ask if they needed prayer, and I really appreciated those times just for how eye-opening they were. This next story I'm about to share with you is one of my more shameful experiences, but I'm thankful to have this experience because it taught me a very valuable lesson. I like to call this story The Night I Should Have Died. It sounds dramatic, but you'll see why I titled it that after I share the story. So there was another girl at this salon. Her name was Marissa, and Marissa had invited me out for her birthday. I was only planning on having one drink because I did have to drive home and I had work the next morning. Well, there was this guy there and John and I really hit it off. I started the night by drinking a Jack Daniels and ginger ale, which was my drink of choice at the time. But John was a wine drinker, so I said, what the heck, I'm gonna have a glass of wine too. Well, that one glass of wine turned into 3. I ended up having a Jack and Coke after that. At this point, it's about 10 p.m. Marissa said we'd be taking the party to a karaoke bar right down the road. At this point, some people said their goodbyes because it was already getting kind of late. I should have been one of those people who said, it's been a nice evening, but I'm gonna go. At this point, I'm so tipsy, I can hardly see one foot in front of the other. I held onto John's arm as we walked into the karaoke bar. This bar was only a beer bar, so they didn't serve any liquor, thank God. And I knew I was too drunk to drink an entire beer, so I asked John if he would split one with me, but I'm pretty sure I just downed most of it anyways. I ended up singing karaoke. My song choice was Sugar We're Going Down by Fall Out Boy. I was so drunk that I couldn't even see the words on the screen, and I didn't really know the song fully by heart. I would hate to know what I even sounded like. After I came down from the stage, I asked John if I could give him my number. So he hands me his phone, and I can't even see to type in my phone number. Like, I'm so gone, y'all. So I hand him my phone and ask him to put his number in. Right after that, I felt like I was gonna throw up. So John escorted me outside, and right after I got outside, I hurled. I can hear people talking around me about how I was gonna get home because they knew I couldn't drive. John obviously volunteered to take me home, but Marissa said, absolutely not. God bless her. She instead had her friends who were married to take me home, so one of them drove me with me in my passenger seat and the other one followed them. When we got back to my parents' house, for some reason I asked the husband not to bring me inside, and he was like, are you sure? Like, I can bring you right to your door, like get your mama, whatever you need. And I was like, no, just put me in the trunk of my car. He was like, you want me to put you in the trunk of your car? You guys, I was driving a Hyundai Sonata. So not even like a SUV or something. He actually did it. He popped my trunk and put me in my trunk. Like, I don't know why he didn't just leave me in the front seat. Anyways, my sister Jenna was the one who saw me first. She said I was dancing in the street by a fire hydrant. She went to go get our mom, and I had went and sat back in the trunk, and my mom comes outside. And I hand her my phone and I say, can you please call my mommy? And she shakes me and she's like, Gabrielle, I am your mother. And the next morning I wake up, I'm sitting on the couch, still in my clothes from the night before, still drunk, and I have to leave for work in 20 minutes. So my dear sister Ashley made me French fries because that's all I really wanted. And on my way to work, I felt so sick. I prayed that I would make it to work without puking. I did end up throwing up in the bathroom shortly after I got to work. I then walked to the grocery store right next door. I got a banana and a Gatorade, and then I had to work my shift. During that shift, I had confessed to Liliana that I messed up and that I drank too much last night. A few days later, me and Liliana go to coffee, and she tells me that I am worth so much more than poisoning my body with alcohol. And her words really resonated with me. Like the Holy Spirit was already working on my heart because I knew I really messed up. And even in my failure, God protected me. After that incident, I pretty much stayed away from alcohol. If I did drink, it was a 1-drink limit and 1 drink only. So one thing I noticed, even after giving my life to Christ, was that I was still very promiscuous. I still took pride in the way I looked, using my body for attention, and I would get myself into these situations where I would go out with a guy simply because I enjoyed the attention, only to find myself going back to his place with him. It would be really awkward because it wouldn't be very long before I would snap out of this facade and say, wait, I don't actually want to have sex with you. And then I'd apologize and say, thank you for your time, but I gotta go home. And that takes us to the next turning point in my life. I have some incredible stories to share with y'all about what happened next. I went to a ministry school and I made so many great memories that I look forward to sharing with y'all in the next episode. So thank you if you made it to this point of the podcast. Please subscribe if you want to continue to listen to the Bespoken Faith podcast, and I will see you in the next one. Be blessed, have faith, and I will talk to you soon.